when you're in sync with your wife or your partner, and he or she is happy, then your partner wants to actively do things to also make your life better. It's reflective. It's a reflective thing. And I think that if your relationship is clicking along and it's inspired and it's passionate and it's goal oriented and it's fulfilling, then everything at the office will fall into place. And when that happens, you make more money.
Welcome to Great Practice, Great Life by Atticus Incorporated. What if you could hang out with successful small and solo law firm attorneys, ask them about their successes and failures, their business strategies and mindset habits, then take an insight or two to guide your own growth in your practice? Each week, Steve Riley shares an in-depth look at how to work less while maintaining high client service standards, reduce your stress levels while growing your income, and find time to make changes when you are time-starved. Steve is a lawyer coach for more than 20 years and a former trial attorney. His goal is to provide strategies to help you balance your lives and grow your practice. Now, here's Steve.
So, Colleen, welcome back to the episode. You were on a prior one and did a fantastic job. Today, you're here to tackle a very fun and difficult question. Why does a great relationship with your spouse or family help you make more money? So are you ready for this?
I'm ready for this.
Okay. So first, thanks for being here. And a lot of people don't really appreciate who you are. So I'm just going to kind of do a brief introduction for people that didn't hear our prior podcast, but I'm going to reference our prior podcast. So you are married to one of my friends, one of our long-term clients, Colleen Goldenfarb. And you and Craig have built a market dominant plaintiffs firm down in South Florida. And you were in broadcast journalism, and you dropped out of broadcast journalism to focus on being a great mom. And you really did that. And you kicked butt at that as well. You spoke recently at the summit, and I got to know you better at the Our Great Life Couples Workshop, but you recently spoke at the summit about the topic of why does work get the best of you and we get what's left of you? And I don't want to go too deep in that, but I want to just kind of frame the context for anyone who's listening for the first time and why you're back today. And you and I subsequently had a conversation about having a great relationship as a lawyer with your spouse actually makes you a lot more money. And everybody that listens to the podcast, and say everybody, but a lot of listeners are not particularly interested in having a greater life. They're really interested in making more money. And so we can see this in our statistics. We get this in our feedback. So you and I had this really fun conversation. And so I thought I'd bring you back on today just to talk about this particular topic. You up for that?
I'm up for that.
Okay, great. So if you're okay.
Can I interrupt you, Steve? I
Sure.
want to thank you for saying that you and Craig built his practice, and because I appreciate you giving me some credit, because I'm not a lawyer, but as you know, he could not do this without me. So thank you for that credit. I appreciate it.
Well, let's talk about that for a second, because a lot of lawyers get lost on that. Like, why could Craig not build a phenomenal practice without your support?
The first thing that comes to my mind is he would be living in a hovel, that when he would be eating, McDonald's every night for breakfast, and he would have dirty clothes and not know where the dry cleaners is. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. But no, the truth is that when you talk about making more money with having a better relationship with your partner leads to making more money, I like to think of it more as being rich, right? Rich in your relationship will make your life richer, which will make you richer, literally. Do you know what I mean? It's the two are intertwined. You can't. Yes, Craig probably would be successful without me. That's the reality. But would he have built the type of practice he has, with the culture that he has, with the emotional connection that he has with his staff, and the way that he runs his practice, where he actually cares about his employees and he cares about his clients? Maybe not. I don't know. I won't give myself all the credit, but I'll take some of it.
Well, he probably will never listen to this podcast, so we'll give you all the credit. We'll just give you the credit, right? We're not going to worry about whether he knows it or not.
He will
Um,
listen to this podcast, by the way, but yeah.
oh, will he? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and it is also, though, it's also flowed into being rich with children, rich with charitable actions, because his multiple charitable interests are very impactful. And so there's a lot of things that you've brought to the relationship. And you kind of said it jokingly, but the truth is, at least for me, um, when I look at lawyers that are not in great relationship with their spouse or not in great relationship with their kids, their performance at work is pretty crappy. Like, they think they're doing great at work, but the performance is pretty crappy. I'll give you my reasons why, and you can add anything that you can think of. But if you're not happy at home, you're not sleeping well, you're hanging out at work, you're taking on cases and work that you probably shouldn't, you're cranky, you're miserable, and you're really not being purposeful in the growth of the practice. I had a call the other day with a lawyer who was thinking about whether he should get divorced or not, and was hesitant about growing the practice further because he didn't want to split, have a valuable firm to split, which is a very difficult way of thinking. I've had this conversation with a woman who built a very successful practice, and she was capping the growth of the practice because she wasn't sure if she wanted to be married. So a rich relationship, like you said, with your spouse is, for me, a unique collaborative relationship where you're building something together. You're building a great life together. You're building a future together. You're building finances together. You're working together. When you are working apart, it drains you. And so your productivity is down, your energy is down. And I see this a lot. From your viewpoint, what do you see? I mean, you've been in that role as the spouse with Craig. You've seen other people. You've been in this role in life. What do you see when someone's not in sync?
Well, speaking from experience, I will tell you, Craig and I have danced with the concept of divorce before. It's not a fun dance, and it's miserable, but we've been through it. I think most people have been. We haven't been through divorce, but we've been through those difficult conversations, and so I can totally relate. But I just want to backtrack for a second. When you say that you spoke to someone recently who wasn't sure that they wanted to stay in their marriage, and that's therefore they wanted to halt the growth of their firm, I would never ever tell anyone to stay in a miserable relationship. We get one shot on this planet that we live on, and you got to be happy. But I would challenge that person to take a look at shifting their focus to what's going wrong in the relationship, because obviously if their practice is doing so well that they have to pump the brakes because they don't want their partner to get half of it in a divorce, then they're clearly out of balance. They're clearly sinking all of their energy into their firm. The firm is thriving, but they're sinking no energy or little energy into the relationship. And if you can get back in balance, you may still end up divorced, and that's okay. It's not the end of the world. But you may discover that when you're back in balance, you can have both. You can have a successful relationship and a successful firm. So shoot for both. That's what I always say. And if you do work on it and you do the things that you need to do and it still doesn't work out, that's okay too.
Well, let's talk about going for both, because sometimes I think lawyers think they can only have one.
Right.
And they only go for one. And so sometimes they think, well, if I just make a bunch of money, I can buy a great life, which, it's,
How's that going for you?
yeah, how's that going? You got to think about that.
Right.
You got to think about that. But if you go for the great relationship, and this is just me, and you can feed back for me, if I'm happy in my relationship with my wife, my children, and I feel purpose driven, I look for ways of making more money to give them a greater lifestyle, to support them. If I'm not in sync with them, then I'm not particularly interested in working more and harder and longer. So I find that when there's wind in my sails in my relationship, there's wind in the business. If there's not wind in my sails in the relationship, there's not wind in the business. If I can get both flowing at the same time, it's a very powerful combo for me. What are your thoughts?
Okay, I agree with that. But I'm going to take issue with one thing you just said. You
Okay.
said when you have wind in your sails, then you're driven to work harder. And my philosophy is not to work harder, but to work smarter. And the reason I think, obviously, I didn't coin that phrase, it's probably overused at this point, but it's really true. And I think the reason I think that Craig is definitely more successful when he and I are gelling and when things are going well for us is because the things that we do to build our best life, our best relationship, include setting certain boundaries and include keeping Craig and myself, but in this context of running a firm, keeping Craig in a certain conversation with me and being mindful of focusing on the things that the goals that we set up. And when he's doing that and when he's holding himself accountable, he's forced to not work harder at work. Ergo, he's forced to delegate. He's forced to rely on his CEO. He's forced to rely on his staff, his executive team, and it pulls him out of the minutia of the little things that are beneath his pay grade, not to sound crass. And when he's doing that, he's working more efficiently and he's making more money. I mean, I would say his best quality, he probably would say this too, but his best quality of what he gives to his firm is his marketing skills. That's what he loves. That's where he's happiest, when he's marketing. He doesn't go to court anymore. He doesn't enjoy that. That's not his thing. He has lawyers who do that, but he loves to market, and that's his thing. So when he gets rid of doing the other things, payroll and all this other stuff that he just is not interested in, and he's just thriving in what he does best, that's when he's making the most money. And him having a better, stronger relationship with me, and him holding himself accountable with how he shows up with me, not just how he behaves, but how much time we spend together, that forces him to manage his time better at work. Again, makes more money.
That's great. So it's a wonderful way of thinking about this. And it's a challenge because what you're saying is, hey, Craig, I want you to spend time with me. I want you to invest in our great life. I want you to commit to that. And I want to go do things with you. In order for him to do that, it requires him to strategically delegate more things in his practice.
Right.
And it's difficult because sometimes as a couple, you say, well, the business takes precedence. And your argument, which you've been incredibly powerful and passionate about, is no, no. I take precedence over the business. The business works for us. As a spouse, I don't work for the business. And that's a powerful place to stand. And a lot of people they don't understand that stance. And you're also making me feel very good about myself. I just want to share with you that I and my wife and I are getting, and I call it a great life adventure. My wife and I are getting ready to go to our annual Great Life Adventure, and we're going to pull off a 5-week trip. So we're getting ready to leave right after the holidays, right after Christmas, for 5 weeks. We're going to Sydney, Australia, and then we're going to go around Australia. We're going to go to take a cruise. We're going to go to the Great Barrier Reef. We're going to go to Fiji, but we're basically going to have about 5 weeks off. Now, as you're listening to that,
My heart is singing right now for you.
Oh, your heart's singing. I thought you were going to say, I'm going to pray for you. It sounds terrible. It just sounds terrible.
No, it sounds amazing.
But this is the purpose of this exercise, is to have, first and foremost for me, a great life and a great relationship with my beautiful wife, and to extract myself for 5 weeks from the business so that other people can really rise up. And we have much more talented people than me at the company, and I get in their way. Like I know I get in their way. So for me, I want the lawyers to listen from the perspective that it wasn't simple to take 5 weeks off. It wasn't simple. It took years of learning the skills, the systems, the procedures, and the processes to get to that point. But you have to ask yourself, what game are you playing? And that's really what you're doing. You have some warning signs. So let's talk about the warning signs, and we'll talk about some of the other benefits. But I want people to hear some of the warning signs that you have of what I think you call it, the 5 things that may make you a roommate versus make you
the 5 reasons that we end up feeling like roommates instead of life partners.
You want to talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, I'll be happy to talk about it. I mean, sure. I got my glasses here because I'm an old lady, but So the first one, I have my notes. The first one is that you stop doing daily rituals and routines like kissing good night or kissing in the morning. And the Gottmans. I'm sure everybody's heard of the Gottmans. I forget their first names, but they're the famous couple that is. They have retreats every year about how to help you connect with your spouse, your partner, and they have this thing where they say the best way to keep the romance alive in your life is to do a 6-second kiss. If you kiss for 6 seconds instead of a quick peck on the cheek or love you, good night, da, 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 but 6 seconds, count it. I'm telling you, it leads to great things. And even if it doesn't lead to anything great, it is, you just feel more in love and more in touch. But when we lose those daily rituals, we start to become roommates. And that's the first one. All right. The second one is, this one I feel so strongly about is if you're feeling like a roommate, it's probably because you aren't setting your phone use limits around each other. And I talked about that at the Atticus Summit about no cell phones in the bedroom, no cell phones at the dinner table. I despise when I see Craig's phone come out, and it makes me feel like, oh, if something more important is going to come along, I'm going to be thrown to the wind. I'm chopped liver. So that's number 2. Number 3 is you don't go on dates anymore. It is so easy to just fall into the watch shows on Netflix, and Craig and I do. We love the show Outlander. In case you haven't seen it, it's fantastic. But anyway, we love to watch shows together, and that's all great. But sometimes you got to get up off the couch and get your butt out into the world and go on dates. That's one of the better ways to keep fresh. This number 4 is kind of difficult for me because it's so true, but it's also, I'm always talking about having meetings at home and planning your best life at home. But this one is you don't talk about your passions and your goals. You end up just talking about logistics. And when I say have meetings at home, like you do at work, it's easy to fall into just talking logistics, going over calendar calls and talking about logistically, how are we going to tackle this? Or how can we plan our next vacation? Or how can we do that? But in those meetings, it's so important to just sit sometimes and just talk about your passions and your goals. That's the conversation you want to be having at dinner. It doesn't have, of course, it's normal to talk about the practical things going on in your life, but don't let it bog you down. Talk about the stuff that you dream about and what really floats your boat, because that will raise the enthusiasm for the relationship. And then the 5th one, I don't even have to look at my notes because I know this one by heart. But the 5th mistake that you make that turns you into roommates is believing the assumption or assuming that scheduling sex is no fun. Therefore, you don't have sex at all. I can't tell you how many times I've mentioned to girlfriends of mine that say, that they're unhappy or whatever. And I say, well, how frequent are you intimate with your partner? And they're like, well, it's been a month or whatever. In some cases, several months. I'm like, why don't you just put it on the calendar? And they're like, that's not fun. That's not spontaneous. I don't want to do that. And I'm like, oh, okay, you don't have to do that. So how has it been going 3 months having a dry spell? You know what I mean? Like, just schedule it already. Shut up, put it on the calendar. And I think I said this at the summit, at the Atticus Summit. Eventually, after a couple scheduled sessions of intimacy, it will come back to you. It's like riding a bike, and then you won't be scheduling it again. It'll be natural. And you'll want it more, and it'll become more frequent and more enjoyable. And if you want me to frame that into how that makes more money, I can tell you that when Craig is satisfied or when we're all satisfied, we bounce off and skip off to work and we're more productive and happier. Have sex to make money.
I will officially say that not only my favorite guest ever on the podcast, but this is officially my favorite episode ever. Because it's the first time we ever talked about sex, and I'm sitting here turning 4 shades of red. But my favorite image right now is Craig skipping off to work.
He might kill me for saying that. I don't know. We'll see.
I don't know. He's so funny. I don't know if he will. But skipping off to work, having Craig skip off to work. Hey, Steve, I just want to talk to you for a minute about probably my favorite workshop to teach right now. It's called The Path to a Great Practice and a Great Life. So it doesn't matter if you're a member or if you're new to Atticus, this is a perfect place to come and start your journey of what a great practice and a great life looks like to you. There are 4 elements to the workshop. The first is about your income. If you're going to have a great practice and a great life, you're going to need some cash. One of the questions I always get asked is there a shortcut? Is there a quicker and easier way of making more money? There is, but there's a catch to it. In order to make more money, you want to study how other lawyers have increased the income and the growth of their practice. One of the things we've done at Atticus for the past 35 years is study what the top 20% earners, 10% earners, and ultimately, what do the top 1% earners do? One of the things that we do is reveal and look at what are the four core strategies of a top 1% attorney and how you can learn from that 1%er in increasing your practice. And that can be your shortcut. To grow your practice faster, you need to have a bold vision for what your life looks like. The wind in your sails for growth is ultimately the vision of what a great life looks like. In my experience, lawyers that have a terrific, powerful vision for a great life will grow a great practice quicker, faster, and more efficiently than those who don't. It's one thing to have a dream, it's another thing to take action and build foundations under that dream. That's the next thing that we'll work on the workshop. What are the steps you're going to take immediately from the workshop to start building on your vision of a great life and great practice? So, if you're a fan of the conversation of what a great practice and great life looks like, this is the greatest opportunity for you to take action now and register for the workshop so we can work together on taking your vision of your great practice and great life and making it come to life. A link to register is included in the show notes, as well as a longer video by me explaining each element of the workshop. If you're a member of Atticus, it's included already in your membership. If you're new to Atticus, I'm giving you a promo code that will take $500 off. All you have to do is click the link below and put in podcast 500 and it'll get you the discount. So hit the link, register for the workshop. I look forward to seeing you there. With that, I hope you enjoy the rest of the episode. I love those because those are benchmarks. Like if you see those benchmarks, it's kind of like, well, you may not be, these may not be signs of the relationship going totally downward, but they're definitely earmarks of the relationship in your eyes not particularly working well. And so what you want to do is reverse those. And your argument is, look, if you're having a great relationship at home, then you're going to have a greater impact at work. Now, I want to go back to number 4 just for a second, and then we can spend as much time on number 5 as you want. But number 4, I think the conversation around logistics versus passion, sometimes you can see this at work, you can see this at home, is sometimes strategy versus tasks. So sometimes when you're thinking, okay, what does a great life look like to us, becomes a conversation. So this vacation, this great life adventure that Kristen and I are going on, was well designed. It was well designed. It was, we designed it in a particular way. We went to Sydney to the Park Hyatt, which is one of my favorite hotels in the world. It's between the Sydney Harbor Bridge and the Sydney Opera House and cruise. And, Kristen, of course, scheduled a little shopping in Sydney. So we designed what would be the elements of a really, really great trip and what would be really, really fun for us as a cruise and what would be really great. So there was some strategy design, like what both of us would want. And this is one of the things that we talked about in our last episode. Is that sometimes when you and Craig did this in the couples workshop, you were disappointed in what Craig wanted to do on vacation versus what you wanted to do on vacation. And so that requires design, that requires strategy, that requires what does a great relationship look like to you? What's it feel like to you? What does it look like we're doing versus scheduling? Hey, look, don't forget we got to go to the in-laws this weekend, or don't forget this has got to happen, or don't forget to take the trash out. I just want to kind of spend a moment on that. Then we can go back to sex. You want to go talk about sex again? Because that was okay. We don't have to.
No.
That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was fun. It was fun. So
I had to take a moment to recover, obviously. So I had to go distract myself.
This is the craziest podcast interview I've ever done. Okay.
All right.
But no, let's talk about the what you were just saying about your vacation. First of all, your vacation sounds amazing, and I want your itinerary when you're done. But
yeah,
but you're right. So when Craig and I did the what's it called, the Atticus Best?
It's called Our Great Life.
Our Great Life. Thank you. Yeah, I might have mentioned this. I don't know if I mentioned it last time we talked, but I actually left the room crying, and because we realized Craig and I were not totally in sync with what our ideal vacation would be. in that instant thought, oh, I married the wrong person. This is not the right thing for me. How we're so out of sync. How can we? And look, at the end of the day, the logistical conversations that we have to have are, where are we going to go on vacation? What are we going to do? That's the planning part of it. But when I say talk about your goals and your passions, you incorporate that into your vacation planning. Because at the end of the day, Craig and I had to figure out, what do we really want to get out of this vacation other than just a break from regular life? And that's the number one goal, is to unplug. But we had to really have some conversations about, okay, look, I like a cold, I'm a Nordic girl. I will put me in a warm ski jacket and put me on a slope, and I'm super happy. He's cold-blooded. He can't regulate his own body heat. So he needs to be sitting on a warm beach or in front of a pool or something, which I find really boring. So what we do is we kind of do back and forth, and we give and take. And sometimes we just got back from Miami, had an amazing time last weekend in Miami. It was great. And then, he'll do cold weather things for me. But the point is, at the end of the day, what do we want to get out of the trip? So if I'm going to drag him to Scotland, for example, as I did last spring in cold weather, I want to know what would really get him going and excited, which is, he loves history. He loves museums. That man will go into a history museum and read every single placard, and he'll be there all day. And I have to pull him out. But he loves that. And I enjoy museums too. So great. We talk about what he's passionate about and we make it happen. And then it's my turn to talk about what I'm passionate about. I need to connect with nature. I'm in a past life, I was like a bog witch. I belong in a mossy, seriously. I give me a moist.
Hold on, you had to say that again really slow so everybody gets that. That was hysterical.
In a past life, I was a bog witch.
Okay. Well, first, you got to explain what a bog witch is. So this is hysterical.
A bog witch is a pagan, I'm going to say goddess, but a woman who thrives in nature and forest, mossy covered rocks and stones, and connects with nature that way. That's totally my spirit animal, is something in the forest. Okay. Yeah. And, Craig is like, I want to be by a pool. But, and that's okay. It's okay that we're different. So, but we have to get to the root of what we're passionate about. And then we can craft the perfect vacation for both of us, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
So talk about your passions. Don't just talk about what hotel you're going to stay at and what tour you're going to go on. Get to the root of why you want to go on whatever tour you're going to go on.
That's great. So I'm going to set the context for a second on the Our Great Life workshop, and then I'm going to ask you to talk about, if you're okay, some of the things that you did out of the workshop to keep things alive. And really what you and Craig did, and you also have a couple of books you want to recommend, or some things that you want to recommend. So let me set the context. So one of the core strategic planning concepts in Atticus is the premise of great life. And it comes from the question, what does a great life look like to you? What's your great practice look like to you? So it's not the most efficient practice, the most focused practice, the most profitable practice. Those can be integrated. So the question becomes, what's the great life look like to you? And one of the centerpieces to that, of course, is our planning tool, the My Great Life Focus, the planner, the focuser. But inside of there is a conversation called My Great Decade, a 10-year planning tool. Like, what's a great 10 years look like to you? And this is horribly confronting to a lot of lawyers.
Oh my God.
It's
and to the spouses. I was horribly confronted by that. Yep.
Yeah, it's terribly confronting. And what's confronting about it is that, and if you're on a treadmill, you're driving right now, here's the question. So you think about what today's date is when you're listening to this podcast, and then do 10 years in the future. So right now it's December 2024. So let's just assume you hear this podcast in 2025. So in 2035, so you have to think about what a great life would look like to you 10 years from now in 2035. You got to write down your age. You got to write down the age of your spouses, the age of children. You have to write these things down so you can really jump ahead in the future and think about what a great life looks like to you. And that way you can plan backwards. You can't from today plan what a great life looks like, because you start to fix things. And what people usually do when they try and do goal setting is they're not really planning from greatness. They're planning from what's crappy about my life? Yeah, they're planning from fear. They're trying to fix stuff. They're trying to fix today's life, but they never take a temporal vacation from today and go to the future and say, actually, from my heart of hearts, from what would make me passionate, from what would make me delighted, what would a great life look like? And it gives you the opportunity to escape from what's not working about your life today and actually redesign from greatness. Now, what's been a problem for us for years as a coach is people will come to us and go, yeah, I took this home and my spouse looked at it and said, that's awesome. I've been here with 3 kids. Take out the trash, help me out, like, do something. And so we've never been able, or should never, it's very difficult for the lawyers after doing this exercise to go home and translate this because they have a huge breakthrough. They're excited. They want to share it with their spouse and they can't because they don't have the skill set. Their spouse, there's no space for it. The spouse has no time for it. So our first experimental workshop on this was 19 years ago, and 20 years ago, 21 years ago now, when Vinny Bonazzoli and his wife Paula kept insisting that we redo it. So you and Craig came to the one like a year and a half ago now. And the premise of it is coming together as a couple, and an Atticus coach facilitates it. And the premise of the question is, what does our great life look like? And you work through our great life tenure, you work through some communication tools, you work through a conversation of what the greatest vacation ever looks like.
We'll stop talking about that one.
Yeah,
No.
that's exactly right. And we talk about how disc profiles, how to communicate based on your disc profiles. So there's a lot of things that we do there. So when you listen to the context of that, what happens is then when somebody leaves, and you and Craig left, and then you leave with a 10-year plan. You leave sometimes with a 90-day plan off the 10-year plan, but you leave with some excitement and possibilities and a plan for a great vacation. And then, I basically, Chris and I led the workshop. We basically open the doors and you run out into the future, but it's up to you to execute. Now, what Colleen's going to talk about, you don't actually have to go to like the workshop to do.
I highly recommend everyone go to the workshop, though. That was transformative for me. So
Thank you.
I'll say that. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. And we'll give you information about the workshop, no doubt. But what I want you to think about as Colleen talks is that the goal of today's episode is to think about how you make more money at work by having a more efficient, effective, and powerful relationship at home. And what Colleen and Craig have done is they've created some practices, everything from a weekly meeting to what, the great life conversations that they're having, to planning great vacations, and then a couple of books, how you've done date nights. Well, before you get into the hows, why, in your eyes, and we started doing this, and I got distracted because you keep bringing up sex. Why, in your mind, will Craig make more money if he's happy at home? Or why do you think you would make more money if you're happy at home? Why do you think happy lawyers who are in happy relationships make more money? What's your take on that? And then we'll talk about the house. Does that work for you?
Yeah. So
Okay.
you mean aside from having sex regularly, what would make you happier? Why would being happy make more money? Okay. I'm kidding.
Well,
Boring.
it could be a wonderful recipe for some people. Some people, not myself, but it's not some people.
So listen, I'm gonna boil this all down to something really simple. And I like to talk in analogies. I like to talk in stories. That's what I do, storyteller as a journalist. But back to the very beginning of this interview, this podcast, you mentioned that you spoke to someone who wasn't sure they wanted to be married, and they wanted to, put the brakes on their business, et cetera. So the expression mending your fences, right? If you're a rancher and you have, a couple hundred cattle on your property and you've got breaches in your fences and the cows are running crazy, you have a choice. You can either spend all of your time and energy on your horse chasing down each individual cow and trying to get him back in the pasture, or you can spend your energy fixing the fence where they're escaping, get that situated. And in this analogy, the fence is home, right? It's your home relationship. Fix that. Then you get the cows back in, and then they don't get out anymore. Then they're happy. And now your ranch is running smoothly and you're probably making more money. I know that sounds really simplistic, but the truth is, if you're not mending your fences at home, you're going to have chaos. You're going to have cows running everywhere. And, I mean, I guess that's not the case for everybody. I don't want to, sit here and say every lawyer listening to this is nobody without a partner. I'm not going to say that. That's too judgy of me. But if you are in a relationship, a committed one, a lifelong committed one, the home fences have to be mended so the chaos and the cows don't get out. That's the first thing I would say. But do you want me to talk about the meetings and the plannings, or do you want me to talk about?
Let's talk about let's talk about, so after you guys left the workshop, let's talk about the meetings and the planning, because a lot of lawyers, when you talk about this and when I've talked about this, are just dumbfounded. They're like flabbergasted about this, because this is actually a huge time saver. And so this is what we're trying to teach. That you want to make more money at work, you want to figure out how to make home work efficiently, because nothing will stress you out than an upset spouse or upset children or miscommunication, poor planning. There's a lot of stress that happens at home, that if you weren't stressed at home and you're happy at home, you'll have a far more productive work life. So what you're walking through are practices, let's just say meetings, the agendas. Walk everybody through that. And we don't have to go in great detail, but I want you to walk them through it, because you have practices that make your great life, our great life with you and Craig, work. So that's what I want you to talk about.
Okay, so the first thing I'm going to say is that we have weekly meetings. I talked about this at the summit, and I will talk till I'm blue in the face how important it is to have meetings at home. And the number one, if you take no advice from anything I say today, the one thing I want everyone listening to this to take away from why meetings at home are so important is they are the best way to consolidate grievances, conflicts, issues, calendar conflicts, anything that comes up in the practice of running a household, managing a family. They consolidate everything to the meeting. So what I mean by that is, I think Craig uses the term bundling. That's a legal term, right? You bundle your meetings. So in other words, every time one of your employees has a problem, they don't just email the boss right away and go, I have a problem with this one thing. They keep a running list of all the problems they're having, or all the issues, or all the questions they need answered. And they save it, they bundle it for when the scheduled meeting is. And that makes the meeting go more efficiently. And it saves the hassle of having to constantly be interrupted at work. It's the same thing at home. So if on a Tuesday night, Craig comes home, I can give you a perfect example. Craig and I had a fight 2 nights ago, and it was absolutely ridiculous. And now I'm trying to even remember what it was. That's how ridiculous it was.
I know that was Craig's fault.
It was 100% Craig's fault. It's always Craig's fault.
You were right.
I'm a bog witch, and no, I'm kidding. But no, it was genuinely, can't remember the fight now. But anyway, it was something where he said something and I got triggered and I took it the wrong way, and it started to escalate into a fight. And then we realized, oh, no, we're gonna put a pin in this. So he called a timeout. I highly recommend. Glenn Finch taught me the timeout technique, and he called a timeout, and I said, great, timeout, and we put a pin in it, and we saved it for a later date. We actually ended up talking about resolving the issue over dinner the next night, but we could have, in theory, saved it for our Saturday meeting. And so that it just diffuses the daily crap that appears in every relationship. And so you bundle the meetings and you have a time to really talk about everything. And the second benefit of having a weekly meeting is, by the time Saturday comes, look, it's only Thursday and I've already forgotten what the fight is about. So, if you put a pin in it, sometimes it just dissipates and it floats off into the air. And that's what you want. You don't want to have a breakdown every time there's any tiny little bit of conflict. Same at work. Craig doesn't want to deal with every little fire that comes up. He wants his team to deal with it, or he wants the employee to figure out how to put the fire out themselves, and that's how you run an efficient firm. That's how you run an efficient family.
Yeah, let's do the meetings when? What days do you do the meetings?
We do ours on Saturday morning because we're empty nesters now. So I know for anybody listening who has small kids at home, Saturday morning is chaos. So you may have to do it on a Monday night or whenever works for you. But for us, we have an empty house. Saturday's relaxing. We go to the gym in the morning, we work out, and then we sit down and have our meeting, and then we go to lunch. And that's kind of how our Saturday looks.
And can you go over the agenda? Can you review
Yeah, so the agenda is easy. We the first thing we do is I wish I had my notes on this, but the first thing we do is we go over, we start on a positive note. We go over what is working, what went right that prior week. Like it could be anything. It could be that the last meeting we set a goal to do something and we actually followed through with it and it worked and we're happy as a result of it. So that could be an example of it. It could also be another example could be, I'll give you an example. Craig and I we're in Miami this weekend and we went to the Miami Heat game. We're huge basketball fans. And we got, from a friend of his, we got amazing seats. We were 15 feet away from the court. It was incredible. And we were just having the best time ever. And we were really connecting. We both love basketball. And it was really great. And at one point, Craig put his arm around me and kind of like snuggled me in and then playfully, oh God, you're going to think I'm obsessed with like sex and stuff. But he playfully grabbed my boob in public. And I was like, and I getting like fake offended. But it was really funny. And we were giggling. And for like just the briefest moment, I felt like we were 24 again and first dating. And it was, I just felt like, I remember what it feels like to be young again. And that, where he's trying to grab a little side boob and I'm embarrassed because we're in public and ha ha ha, and that was great. So that was an example of, when we got back and we had our meeting, I said,
those were in fact premium tickets.
Those were really premium tickets. But, little things like that, remind your spouse if they do something right that makes you feel great and young and in love again, tell them. So that's the first step. We go over what's working, what went right. And then we discuss what second step is what didn't go right. We promised we were going to do this, but we kind of got lazy and we didn't, and it didn't work for us. Or, this comment that you made hurt my feelings. That didn't work for me. So that's what we do second. And then the third thing is we update each other. This is the logistics part, which is boring, but it has to be done, which is we update each other on what projects we have going and whether it's vacation planning or, or the roof is being fixed or whatever. Kind of just give a quick update. I'll gloss over that because it's boring. The next thing we do is we do a calendar call because we have learned the hard way that when I don't know what Craig's evening plans are, sometimes he has a marketing dinner or he's playing soccer that night or whatever. If I don't know, and then I make dinner and then he's home late and he says, I thought I told you, I'm furious because I'm sitting at an empty table waiting for him like a dork. And, so I need to know his schedule and he needs to know mine, less so than I do his, but I really need to know his schedule. So, I went out of order. Back up. We review our 90-day goals because those are always changing and our weekly goals. So we kind of review the goals we set. What did we accomplish? What did we not accomplish? Maybe we changed our mind and that goal ended up being stupid and we didn't want to do it. That happens. So we review the goals. We make sure we're still on the same page and that we still have the same goals that we're going to work towards. And then we wrap it up with, what do we want for the following week? And Craig and I like to do a thing where we make a request of each other, something that we want. This week, I said, I want more playful boob grabbing. It's true. I did. I felt so young and just, I loved it. I felt young and desired and playful. And I want more of that because Craig struggles with being, playful. He's a very serious guy. So my job's to make him playful and his job is to, keep me calm. So
I'll stop you from, casting spells on neighbors.
Exactly.
Well, if you're okay sharing the agenda, what I'll do is put in the show notes the agenda so people can look at it. And this is something that you and Craig have created a practice on reviewing weekly. So I want people to listen from the perspective that, you're putting work in making your great life, your relationship work, which reduces the stress, the miscommunications, the miscountering, the misunderstandings that cause stress between you and he. So it actually is, for me, liberating because I was like, okay, good. I know we're going to talk about this on Saturday. We're going to review this on Saturday. We're going to talk some things through on Saturday. So we have our life planning meeting, and it's not an accidental thing. It's an invested time for you and I, in this case, you and Craig, to work on it. I think it's great. I think it's really great. Anything else you want to say about that before I ask you a couple other questions?
About the meetings? No, that's you covered it.
Perfect. Now, you've also got a couple of books that you recommend.
I do.
And what are those?
Okay, so this is a book that Craig and we actually haven't completed it. I don't think we've done all 8 dates. I think we're on like 6. But anyway, this is a book called 8 Dates, and it's by John Gottman. And what it is it's essential conversations for a lifetime of love, blah, blah, blah. Sounds like, marketing stuff. But what it does is it has 8 chapters. Each chapter is a date night, and it gives you a theme. But what it also does is it gives you a series of questions that you can discuss at dinner. I'm going to hold this up, but can't really see it, but it gives you a series of questions that you can answer. Some of them you can answer in advance of the date, and some of them are talking points to discuss on the date. And I'll just give you an example I'll look at the chapters here, because this was really fun. And this is where I thought I knew everything about Craig. We've been together for 30 years. And doing these 8 dates, and we ended up, going longer than actual 1 date per chapter. But I learned things about him, and he learned things about me that we never knew about each other, which enriches the relationship. So the titles of the dates are, agree to disagree, addressing conflict, lean on me, trust and commitment. That was a big one for me, because I'm an INFJ. Like I don't do small talk. I don't want to get deep with people. I need to feel safe around them. I need to feel that I can trust them and with anything I share. And that was important for me.
Hold on. I'm going to stop you for a second. What does that mean when you say that acronym? So for people who don't understand that, what's that mean?
INFJ.
Yes.
So it's the Myers-Briggs personality type. And I've also taken the DISC, by the way, as has Craig. And I know that most of your listeners are already familiar with the DISC, but the Myers-Briggs personality type is kind of like the DISC. It's a similar concept, but it is more related to your personality in life, not necessarily. Whereas the DISC, I'm gathering, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the DISC is more of, you explain the DISC, Steve. I don't know.
I'll explain it. So the DISC is basically a self-assessment of how you would prefer the world to work. And it gives you the capability to understand how to work in teams, how to communicate in relationships, how to not communicate in relationships, as the case may be. And one of the funny things at the couples workshop is when we prepared, about 90% of the people that were in relationship, male or female, married long time or short term, were actually exact opposites on the DISC profile. So I found this to be fascinating. So I've got 10 people in front of me that they're in relationship. 9 out of 10 are the couples are exact opposite of each other. So if you lay their profiles down, they actually sync. So it's kind of crazy, right?
It's crazy. And the Myers-Briggs personality type, which you can just Google and do for free. It's just, there's a questionnaire, you fill it out, and then
Yeah. So explain why that's important to you, and explain what your profile is and why that's important.
Okay, so Craig and I are opposites, by the way. I forget the 4 letters of him, but I know he's an extrovert. He's an EX something something, and which means, I don't know if it's an X, but I've already forgotten his. But the nickname for his personality type is the executive. He's the executive. He's much more logical. He's much more structured, and that's kind of his personality. And he's also an extrovert. Which means he gets his batteries charged by being with other people. I'm the opposite. I'm an INFJ, which is I'm an introvert. And I know a lot of people who have met me at Atticus would probably think that's hilarious, because I am very outgoing, but it's a mask. I mask as an extrovert. I much more prefer my alone time. Not prefer, but I'm very comfortable with my alone time. Craig is not. INFJ. N is intuitive. I'm highly intuitive, meaning I call it like a superpower. I can read people really well. Like I would be a perfect fake psychic. I could make millions being a cold reading psychic. You know what I mean? because
Well,
I
you
can
do have
read
the
people.
background of the bog witch, so I'm just
That's
saying,
right. It's my
psychic bog
magic.
witch,
It's my
psychic bog
magic.
witch.
Yeah. I'm going to throw some bones out and read your future. No. But uh, anyway, INFJ. I forget what the F stands for and what the J stands for, but the long and the short of it is my personality type is I'm introspective, I'm intuitive, highly empathic, which means I get affected by people easily, which is not a superpower. I can have my feelings hurt very easily, and I can also feel that I've disappointed others very easily. So that's important for Craig to know because he's less empathic. It doesn't mean he's a psychopath. He has feelings and he cares and he cries, but he doesn't get as impacted so easily. So I don't want to go, we could do a whole podcast on just personality types, but much like the DISC is helpful to people running a business, the Myers Briggs personality typing is helpful to interpersonal communication. Craig knows that I need to unplug, I need to recharge my batteries alone. So he gives me that time. I know he needs to charge his batteries with people. So I pull myself out of my bog and I go out with him and socialize. And I usually have fun once I'm there, but getting me there is it's horrible. But anyway, knowing those things about your partner and you're learning them through the book 8 Dates is really, it changes how you communicate. It helps you learn how to speak your partner's love language. Um, I'm not a huge fan of love languages, to be honest, the whole book, but it is true that we have a certain way we need to be handled and spoken to, or that impacts us the best possible way. And if we only speak to our partners or our employees or whatever in our language and what we need, it might not be what they need. So then you're just talking to a wall. And so knowing other people's it's so cliche, but knowing other people's love languages or knowing their personality type or knowing their disc is so beneficial in how you talk to them, how you give them what they need so that they can perform for you, produce for you. I'm talking in an employee situation, but also in a relationship situation. So,
Perfect.
I think I
Perfect.
rambled a little bit there. Sorry.
Oh, no, it's okay. It's totally fine. You want to talk about the other book you want to
Yeah.
recommend?
So this one is not about communicating with your partner or anything, but someone gave me this when I turned 50. I'm 54 now, but someone gave me this book. It's called Things to Do When You Turn 50, and it's by Ronnie Sellers. You don't have to be 50 to do these things. They're pretty incredible. But it's what was great about this book for me was that it gave me ideas of things I never even thought that I wanted to do. So it's just a nice little list, a to-do list. Craig really likes lists. I mean, I like lists too, but he really likes everything to be structured. So I got this book as a gift when I turned 50 from a good friend of mine. And we kind of took this as a challenge to start incorporating into our life together of just fun, incredible things that you got to do before you die, basically. And I recommend anybody read it, regardless of age.
I love it. So it's basically gave you guys some prompts or some ideas to do things together and explore different things together. So fantastic. So my favorite bog witch, is there any advice or practical advice you'd like to give to our listeners about how to make more money by having a great relationship with their spouse? Anything else that you want to say before we wrap up?
I'll just conclude with it really is true that, there's an expression that I can't stand, but it really is true. Happy wife, happy life. And I think it gets bastardized a little bit. Too many people think that means, oh, you have to just make your wife happy and dedicate your whole life to her. That's not what it means. It means when you're in sync with your wife or your partner and he or she is happy, then your partner wants to actively do things to also make your life better. It's reflective. It's a reflective thing. And I think that if your relationship is clicking along and it's inspired and it's passionate and it's goal oriented and it's fulfilling, then everything at the office will fall into place. And when that happens, you make more money. It's just the laws of nature.
I think that's perfect. I think too many people see their life as separate selves. This is my law practice life. This is my home life. This is my sports life, whatever, and fail to The old Buddhist joke, wherever you go, there you are, not to see themselves as an integrated self and not to see the power of integrating happiness, joy, greatness everywhere, and seeing that an integrated self is a far more powerful than a fractionalized self. So you can, harmonize where everything works for you in your life. And I think sometimes as lawyers, because we're trained to be analytical, we're trained to be clinical, we're trained to compartmentalize, like put things in little boxes and keep them there where they're safe, or keep us safe from those little things, that we fail to see the power of an integrated life, a power of a great life with our spouse, our family. And I want to thank you because you brought that to us today. You brought that in a very authentic and courageous and fun, bog witchy kind of way. And I love that about you. So Craig's a very lucky man. I know he knows that. And we're very lucky as a community to have you part of our community. So I just want to say thanks, Colleen. Thanks for the hard work. And thanks for the contribution today.
Thank you, Steve. I love chatting with you. It's been a blast.
Thanks for joining this week's episode of Great Practice, Great Life. Please tune in weekly to get the next episode. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe, like, and don't hesitate to share it with a friend who you think this episode could help. With that, thanks, and I hope you enjoy next week's episode.